Let me ask you a question. Who taught you your first language? If you're like most people, it was probably your mom, right? With love and patience, on the good days at least, she immersed you in a new world of sounds and ideas until you could correctly say what she already knew you meant. But then later in life, when it came to learning a second language, where did you turn? Why is it that when it comes to learning our second language, we immediately pull out the conjugation charts, the grammar books, and the latest apps? I don't mean to imply that these tools don't have their place. What I am saying is that I think it's time we brought motherly love and immersion back into the art of language learning. When I was 8 years old, my mom was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. And at that age, you always expect every story to have a happy ending. So when she passed away 2 years later, my heart was broken and a lot of the beliefs I had held about how stories are supposed to go shattered. At 10 years old, I decided it was time to become an adult. And by 15, 16, it was pretty evident that my adulthood was going very poorly. I had a lot of bad habits and I was going downhill pretty fast. College wasn't really on the horizon. I was also a bleach blonde, but that's a story for another day. At 16, my biggest plan was a year abroad in Spain where I'd finally get the true independence and freedom that I thought I was looking for. Life, fortunately, had other plans, and they arrived in the form of my host mom, Isabel. Isabel would get worried when I left the house without a jacket. She was never convinced I'd had enough to eat. And she had this uncanny way of knowing from just a look at my face that there was something wrong. And then the way she would listen, that problem, whatever it was, would shrink smaller and smaller. I went to Spain expecting I'd finally learn how to do it all myself, but instead I learned that I don't have to. And my relationship with Isabel led me to stay in Spain for a second year. And in 2019, I graduated from a local public high school taught entirely in Spanish, outside of any exchange program. I had fallen in love with immersion, language, and learning, and I even ended up applying to college. In Spain, a seed was planted. There's something special about the way a mom listens, and it transcends all cultural, linguistic, and geographical barriers. Since then, I've come to see that many moms share this knack for cross-cultural communication, and I spend my time harnessing the power of motherly love to change lives and hopefully help us rethink education. So I've told you 2 mom stories already. I've told you the story about my mom in small town Maine, and I've told you about my host mom in Seville, Spain. The third mom story I want to tell you is about Suni. Suni is a mom living in Zona 3 of Guatemala City, the home of the Guatemala City garbage dump. Moms like Suni work as guajeros under the hot sun in the city's nearly 40-acre garbage dump, sorting through trash and looking for items they can reuse or sell. Moms like Suni typically earn between $3 to $5 in their average 10-hour workday, which is half of what men make doing the same job. They're also exposed to innumerable risks, including methane fires during the dry season, landslides during the rainy season, sharp objects that can cut them as they're sorting through the trash, and now the added danger of COVID-19. There's also a profound social stigma associated with being a guajero. Even though guajeros are actually doing a public good by keeping their cities cleaner, many citizens look down upon moms like Suni, and they'll often be discriminated against when it comes to finding work in the formal sector. Social and economic factors also lead many young people in Zona 3 to drop out of school at a very young age. For example, 60% of adolescents in this community will become teen parents. This is coupled with systemic, gender-based violence at a macro and micro scale. And moms like Suni are often the sole breadwinners and caretakers in their families, which in her case consists of 6 children. This is a story that may not surprise you. What might, however, is the second part of Suni's story. Because Suni also founded a women's support group for survivors of domestic violence in Zona 3. And now, in the wake of COVID-19, the group stays connected by videos that they send each other via WhatsApp. And in one video, for example, Suni shows her entire family sitting around the dinner table and praying together before a meal. In another video, she films her young son washing his hands as he explains to everyone in the neighborhood why it's important to stay safe in these times. And in another video, Suni says positive affirmations to herself in the mirror and encourages other moms in the community to do the same. Suni has also gone back to school through a local NGO, and she's in the process of acquiring that high school diploma that she had been told wasn't for her. And as of April 2020, Suni is also a Spanish tutor. Project Olas employs moms like Suni in the community surrounding the Guatemala City garbage dump as online Spanish tutors. I founded Project Olas last year because of that seed that was planted in Spain. I saw that students in the Spanish classroom weren't able to engage meaningfully with the language through speaking and listening, organic storytelling, and relationship building, which had been the heart and soul of why I loved living abroad. I was also an ESL tutor, and through that work I found some fascinating statistics about the rates of communications technology penetration in Central America. I found that although a project like Olas would not have been possible a couple of years ago, now about 70% of moms in communities like Suni's do have access to mobile phones. So in launching Olas, I had two hopes. I hoped that students in the Spanish classroom would be able to engage with the language in the ways that I had found meaningful. And I also hoped that moms like Suni would be able to put food on the table for their children without having to engage in dangerous work. I had a hunch that that mom connection that I'd experienced with Isabel in Spain would be a factor, but I never could have predicted the results. Since Olas's launch, I've come to see that oftentimes the need that these language lessons are addressing cuts us to our very core. It's a need deeper than simple language acquisition for students, and I think even greater than the monetary value of a lesson for moms. There are needs similar to those that I didn't know I had until I met Isabel in Spain. But there's a powerful idea at play in these conversations, and it's much, much bigger than me. So in April of 2020, we employed Suni at Project Olas, and she, like the other 14 moms we employed in our first couple of months, was very nervous to get started. Suni told me that although she'd worked with NGO volunteers and she'd interacted with tourists, she'd never been in the position of teaching them. This was a complete shift in dynamics for her. But after those initial nerves wore off, students began to see that second part of Suni's story, her leadership, her compassion, and her faith. I'll never forget when one of Suni's first students called me after their first lesson, and she told me, voice quivering, "Suni is an amazing woman." Since then, many students have had a similar reaction to working with Suni and the other moms in the program. Students are inspired when they learn that Blanca is a talented artist, and they, like me, are moved when they learn that Mirna led the charge to bring potable water to her entire neighborhood. So through these Project Olas lessons, moms are changing the narrative about the way that the rest of the world views a community like Zona 3. But, and I think more importantly, moms are also changing their own narratives. They're changing the way they tell their own stories in their family and in their world. The perfect example of this is Jamie. Jamie has told me that before becoming a teacher at Project Olas, she was very shy, very quiet, and it was difficult for her to make connections with other people. I remember the first video that Jamie ever sent us, where it was pretty obvious she was having a hard time looking the camera in the eye, and she was very nervous. But fast forward 6 months, and Jamie just sent us a video for us to show to our entire student population, where she stands radiating confidence as she speaks from her personal experience about women's rights issues and education in Guatemala. Jamie says that through Project Olas lessons, she now finds joy in making sure that her students feel comfortable and secure as they learn a new language. But she's also told me that this has expanded into her daily life, and she now finds joy in making connections with other people in her community. It seems to me that through this new identity as a teacher, Jamie is changing the way she tells her story. And she's not the only one, because her 2 young sons now affectionately refer to her as Señor, or teacher. So in the first couple of months of Olas's lunch, I'd already gotten a glimpse as to the potential that these conversations can have. But in June of this year, everything changed for moms in an instant, and my eyes were open wide to the true power that these connections can have. In June of this year, President Giamatti of Guatemala implemented strict stay-at-home orders, which meant that Guatemalans were prohibited from leaving their homes from 5 p.m. on Fridays to 5 a.m. on Monday mornings. And added to that was a strict curfew in place from Mondays through Fridays and enforced by police officers who patrolled the streets. And added to that was the increasingly restricted operating hours of grocery stores, outdoor markets, and banks. This might sound well in line with the rest of the world given a global pandemic, but think for a moment what this means for a place like Zona 3. The moms that we work with live in small metal huts called champas that often overheat in the 80-degree weather. They live in those champas with up to 16 family members. And for the families in Zona 3, it's rarely an option for them to buy enough groceries to last them the entire week, so the increasingly restricted operating hours of essential stores and banks posed an incredible impediment to their lifestyles. And in addition to this, all supplementary income generating programs that were pre-existing in the community, as well as educational resources, were closed to the public, and access into the garbage dump itself was prohibited. In response to these devastating changes, we rapidly mobilized and did everything we could to recruit more students, working around the clock, hoping to provide some relief, both monetary and psychological. We were worried about whether the world would even be interested in what was going on in Zona 3 during such a difficult global moment. But in the moments of pause, when I stopped and really listened to what was taking place in the conversations, I heard something really special. Moms were comforting their students. In a time when everything in their lives was in unprecedented upheaval, their nurturing kindness and steadfast hope was changing their students' lives. Every day I was getting texts and calls from students all saying the same thing. My connection with my Olas mom makes me feel like everything is going to be okay. So what is this motherly love that's so hard to quantify? This X factor, the kindness, the compassion, the comfort, it's something you can't build into an app or a textbook. The closest I've come to being able to define the types of relationships that students build in these Project Olas lessons is this. It's the kind of listening that makes you change the way you tell your story. And the importance of the way we tell our own stories cannot be understated. For me, for the longest time, the way I told my own story of moms was one purely of loss. But now, with my connection with Isabel and from my connections with the many Olas moms who I have the honor of working with on a daily basis, that story has begun to take on a different meaning. And it now reads much less like a story of untimely loss and bitterness, and much more like a story of profound gratitude and sober hope. And somewhere in that sea of darkness and confusion during my mom's illness and in its wake, I now find solid ground upon which to stand, because I have faith that this story of moms can have a different ending. And as I've learned from all the mothers in my life, wherever there is fear and calamity, there's also the opportunity to comfort and care for somebody else. Thank you.